portait l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, there are several delegation items to be heard this evening. If the items are pulled under items requiring separate discussion, we have 3 delegations to speak to item 7, Mr. Harry Wells, Mr. Jack Kalinga, and Mr. David Sisko, and 1 representative to speak to item number 8, and that's Mr. Thomas Hill, CEO of Fermedica.
And if these items are pulled, bringing that to my attention. I know from the media I saw you with hand going up and I couldn't understand why you were trying to vote with the council. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to termination of items requiring separate discussion. Mr. Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4, item 7, and item 8.
Seven and
8.
8. Any further items from any member of council? Councilor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 2, please.
Councilor Kenny? Anyone else? Councilor Waters?
Yes, please. Item number 10.
Item 10. Anyone else? At this time, I call for approval of those items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councilor Danch, seconded by Councilor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. We have a presentation this evening from Mario Madia. Mr. Madia here. Would you come forward? And Sharon Shills. Would you please come up to the mic and push the little red button? Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know you were here at 5:30, but that was a in-camera item.
We were really prepped and prepared.
Well, not everyone is that eager to come before us.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Maloney, council members, City of Port Colborne staff, members of the public. My name is Sharon Shills. I am the center manager of the Port Colborne YMCA. I'm pleased to be here tonight to present the 6-year highlights for the Port Colborne YMCA. With me is Mario Medea, VP of Finance Administration and IT. So tonight's topics will include highlights from the 2017-18 year for Port Colborne YMCA, review of the 2012 to 2017 financial results, in comparison of the 2017-18 fiscal performance to what budget is, and actions related to Bill 148, the minimum wage increase and the impact on the Port Colborne YMCA.
I would point out that you have 10 minutes for your delegation.
Yes, thank you. A few of the 6-year highlights. We have over 75 staff throughout the year, over 50 volunteers. We served an average of 2,327 members and supported over 400 children and individuals and families through financial assistance. Partnered with over 22 community organizations and engaged children and youth participants with over 1,640 camper days. So we're continuing to serve the community with an average of 11,225 community accesses monthly by both YMCA members and community participants. 56.9 joined as a family, 4,542 family and swim passes overall, and over 7,056 guest passes throughout the year. Our community access to YMCA's programs increased consistently each year, growing to over 17,000 in year 6, which is over an increase of a few thousand from the previous year. The YMCA continues to provide leadership for a different number of community events, and we are also involved consistently with the City of Port Colborne in different events as well, and a few of those are listed on the screen, including Canal Days, Community Awareness Day, Sports Fest, Valet Day, just to name a few. The YMCA continues to expand programs and services based on community feedback and interest. Through this, we have refreshed our approach to marketing and acquisition. We've launched quite a few new programs within the YMCA and implemented new national aquatic standards and enhanced our child protection standards, just to name a few. So what's exciting this year, we have a new process for financial assistance. Now we're just asking people to bring in a notice of assessment, and it's used in conjunction with a socioeconomic income range grid. It is our intention to never deny access to our programs and services based on an individual or family social economic circumstances. Our program is to serve those with the greatest need in the community. And as you can see, we have served 17% of our members are currently receiving financial assistance and hoping to continue to grow that number. So now I would like to invite Mario up to present the financial results.
Okay, thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Maloney, Council, and City staff. I just want to walk you through the financials. Next slide there. And I would just want to start with going back to the original agreement signed in 2013. At that time, the City of Port Colborne agreed to fund the operations of the YMCA for the first 5 years in the amount of $300,000. And there was a guiding principle in that agreement that said there should be no financial hardship to the city in terms of giving more than $300,000, and to the YMCA in terms of funding a deficit on operations. And if you look at the 5-year results, you can see by the the net contribution, we achieved that goal, and in fact, in 2 years, we were able to return some funds to the city. Okay. We now turn to this past year, which is the first year of the next 5, and we had presented a budget. You can see that in the first column, which showed a deficit of $48,000. The actuals are now in, and we're coming in with a deficit of $46,000. We had a little bit more revenue, but slightly higher expenses, so net savings of $2,000. Now that deficit is, significant compared to the previous 5 years, and the main reason for that is Bill 148, which I'll talk about now. I just want to say that, first of all, the YMCA Niagara is fully supportive of a living wage concept, but the rate of increase has impacted us significantly, and in fact, all Ys in Ontario, because we're a leading employer of youth. So these are some of the actions, YMCA of Niagara specifically has taken, pre-Bill 148 and post. We had an October 2017 price increase. We engaged external consultants to review our salary structure. We entered into new shared service agreements for our CEO and VP of Health, Fitness, Aquatics, and we relocated our administrative offices out of a third-party rental into our Welland HFA. The last two items were cost savings items. Going forward, we've successfully implemented phase 1 of Bill 148. We plan on increasing our prices annually. We're improving the quality. We're focusing on membership growth, and discussions are now underway with the YMCA of Oakville and Hamilton, Burling, Brantford on a possible combination of YMCAs. This next grid is just graphically trying to illustrate to you what impact Bill 148 had and wage compression. So if you look on the left, there's the minimum wage, $11.60, and different levels. This is not YMCA specific information, it's an example. And between each band, you start at the lowest, there's a $2 spread. So minimum wage comes in $14. If you do nothing but just raise those to $14, you'll see what happens on the right. The spread between level 1 and 2 is basically gone, and even the spread between 2 and 3, which used to be $2, is now $1.60. So the only way to correct that is increase each band closer to get to 1, and that has a compounding effect through the whole pay scale. As you get to the highest bands, that tends to go away. But that's what we were faced with in January 1, 2018. Next slide. So just to show you the actual results as they relate to the Port Colborne YMCA, for the period January to August, our fiscal year ends August, we paid $139,000 to those who were at the minimum, which was over half of our staff. If there had not been a Bill 148, it would be $115,000. The 20.8 increase is basically the increase from $14 to $11.60. For the other bands that are affected, we paid $220,000 versus what we would have paid of $198, an average of 11% increase. So the wage impact was $46,000. When you add benefits, over time, it's another $9,000. The impact of Bill 148 in this past fiscal year was about $56,000 on the YMCA operations. So this last financial slide is basically taking the budget, where we ended up, and where we would have been had it not been for Bill 148. And again, I want to reiterate that the YMCA is supportive of the living wage concept, but the increase was fairly dramatic. And had it not been for 148, we would have had a positive surplus, consistent with the 5 years in the past. And in summary, we just want to say we have a continued focus on improving HFA. We're focused on membership retention and growth. The first 5 years were successful in terms of service and financially. Bill 148 had a dramatic cost increase for the YMCA. We are grateful for the partnership with the city and pleased to serve the citizens of Port Colborne. And finally, at the start of this year, we had requested some assistance from the city of about $22,000, and we're just back to respectfully request that assistance. So thank you very much, and we're pleased to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Media and Ms. Schultz. Yes. Mr. Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. You talked about the bands and their increases and how the first two would have, I'll just say they would have flatlined.
Right.
Can you tell me if and then you said the highest band, it had like really not an effect?
Right.
So did the highest bands get an increase as well?
They got an increase of 1.5%, yes.
Thank you.
Finished, Mrs. Butters?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other questions to the presenters? You indicated in your presentation that you'll be exploring with Oakville, Burlington, etc.
Yes.
I assume it's a possibility of amalgamation.
Yes.
Would you come back to the city and give us more information on that? Because we will perhaps be a partner of that organization.
Yes, we will.
Well.
I can give you a little more information at this time, Mayor, if you like. Yeah, it's a three-phase approach. Each phase is about 6 months long. We're in phase 1. We're concluding phase 1, where it's really investigating, and the boards of the 3 Ys will be deciding by year end whether or not to proceed to phase 2. and then that would be another 6 months, and then phase 3 would be kind of the implementation. So it would be, like a year from now, but we would keep the city updated on how that progresses.
Is it anticipated that there will be substantial cost savings of this amalgamation?
The objective is not really cost savings, it's more capacity, but there will be cost savings just by the mere fact of the size and the leveraging of purchasing services and things of that nature.
Well, we look forward to hearing more of that when the
Thank you.
time comes.
Thank you.
Mr. Badner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not necessarily to the presenters, but you're basically asking for $22,000 to help offset that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Peter. Peter, is this coming to budget? Is that where we'll handle that part of it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bodnar. This was actually part of the 2018 budget, so we had anticipated it with when the YMCA came to our budget meeting in 2018. So we did budget for that. The money is there for to cover that expense.
Okay, so the presenters then are just asking for the check, basically. If we've already passed it, is that how's this going to all roll out? Is what I'm wondering.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as it was approved by council in the 2018 budget, what the YMCA annually does, obviously, is comes to council and shows them the financial results. And due to the fact that they were budgeting that deficit and had requested those funds from the city in 2018's budget, and now knowing what the actual numbers are, we'll be able to provide those funds to the YMCA, and then YMCA more than likely will be coming back to our 2019 budget.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council? There being none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is this yours?
Next on the agenda are delegation items. As indicated previously, we will receive those delegations when we discuss those items in our report here this evening. Moving on to Mayor's report. I just have a few comments. Specifically, the first one is on municipal elections. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the citizens of Port Colborne for participating in this year's municipal elections. I would also like to extend my appreciation to all of the candidates, for putting their names forward for election. And congratulations to the candidates who were successful. I do encourage citizens to keep involved and seek representations on a municipal committee. The notice listing committee positions available is on our website, and applications will be received up to November 20th, and the new council will make a decision on the choices of those individuals. You will note around the chamber here tonight items dealing with Remembrance Day and Bells of Peace ceremonies. We didn't have a council meeting right before Remembrance Day, but we're coming here sort of a couple of days after it, and I encourage you to take a look at these items. We extend our appreciation to the members of the Royal Canadian Legion for the Remembrance Day services and Bells of Peace ceremonies held on Sunday. Special thanks to the 79th Lyndon Davies Air Cadet Squadron members for the vigil held over Saturday night at the Cenotaph, and also to the Navy League members for their presence during the ceremonies. Of course, the Ladies Auxiliary of the Legion who kept everyone fed and happy. Both ceremonies were well attended by members of the public, and once again, it's we pride ourselves on this community's participation on Remembrance Day. That's the extent of my report. We don't have a regional council's report this evening. At this time, we move on to item number 13, council's items. Are there any issues that councilors wish to bring forward? Councilor Bodnar, Councilor Danch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to probably the Parks Department, I guess. A while ago, I brought up that some trees needed to be cut in Centennial Park. Staff did take care of cutting one of the ones that was dangerous to somebody's barn. But but they came in and they cut it up and they left it in the drain. I would imagine the plan is to come back and pick that all up, but for somebody that may have drainage issues anyways, they have a question. They called me today and wanted me to bring it forward. So I can assume that that's the plan, but I'd like to hear from someone
Ms.
if
Lott?
that's the plan.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar. Yes, that is the plan. We had actually looked at a third party taking care of that, but given the high winds last week, they were delayed with coming.
Okay. Another one, Mr. Mayor. In keeping with Centennial Park also, was contacted by a couple of neighbors of that park. There was 2 ATVs on Saturday night, I think it was, that were running through the park and actually running around the neighborhood, creating a disturbance. I just wondered whether there was any damage in the park property. Certainly, I would assume ATVs aren't allowed in the park, but I just wondered whether you had heard of any damages in that area.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar. No damages have been reported today.
Okay, thank you. A couple more, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
Through you to Steve, I guess. I had talked to Chris Lee a few months ago about bringing a report forward on some of the stone roads that we own in Ward 4. And Chris was going to bring that report forward to give us some information on what it would take to put some kind of a surface on those. There's always questions from residents. You know, you're spending a lot of money treating these roads all summer long, and you know, would it save money if we actually put a hard surface on it? And I know Chris was going to come forward with that sometime in the fall. Just wondered if you could check in on that and see how we're coming with that report. And I know it'll come to the new council, but if you could put maybe a kind of a time frame on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar. We can look at probably for early spring for that, and then we can have it in gear for next season for resurfacing. What we'll do is we'll make a list of all the current stone roads, and then we'll weigh out some options as to how we want to proceed, and then we'll bring that to council and update you accordingly for some pricing.
Okay, thank you. And another one, Mr. Mayor, in the recent windstorms, there was a number of trees came down actually in the drains. You can see a couple as you drive down Kalali Street just laying right across those drains. I wonder what our plan is, because there's got to be a lot more of those we don't see. And if someone can check this out, and are we going to walk the drains? How are we going to assure that there isn't some trees actually laying right in some of our drains that could cause some problems upstream for flooding for people?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, I can have our acting drainage superintendent at this time look at the drains and actually go through and look at them. I'm sure there are a number of trees down, and we're doing it on a as called in basis right now, but you're right, we should be looking through the drains and determining if there is an issue right now. So we can progress with that, and I'll ask her to do that.
Okay, thank you. That's it for now.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to Mr. Danch, Ms. Lott, are those incidents with ATVs in our parks been reported to the police, or will they be reported to the police? The ATVs that Mr. Bodnar referred to?
To you, Mayor, not knowing the circumstances, I don't know if the citizen did call the police. I do believe through conversations with Councillor Bodnar that there was damage done to private property, so I would suspect that a report was given to Niagara Regional.
But can we make a report because of the intrusion on city property?
I could look into it, certainly.
Good, thank you. Mr. Danch.
I'm just going to echo Councillor Kenny there about that crossing on Kalali Street at the train tracks there, the one that takes out your front end every time you go over it. I just wonder if we're ever going to get this thing fixed.
We've been promised for 3 years.
Steve?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Danch. I know this has been looked at a number of times before. I'm not sure of the exact point that it stands right now, but I can find out and I can provide all of you an update probably by Thursday.
you. And I don't think, so Mrs. Kenny, I see you down there, but I don't see you. Did you want to comment?
Well, Mayor, I'm sorry. There's no point in commenting, because we get the same answer every time. We're looking into it, we're looking into it, we're looking into it.
All right.
And now we're this far. Now, apparently, I understand from the last report from Chris, we have the region on board to fix it, and the city keeps saying they want to fix it, but we haven't heard from Trillium Rail Lines as to their participation in having the problem fixed.
Okay.
But, like I say, we could chirp forever here, right? Chirp, 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 but all the chirping doesn't get the work done.
Okay, we've
Thank
heard,
you,
we've
Ms.
heard
Grant.
from Mr. Ostromowski that we'll have a report back by Thursday. And you've heard Mrs. Kenny's concerns. And we'll perhaps take that to heart and make sure we have a fulsome report to present to council. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Emery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Steve. Steve, I sent an email to Chris on November 1st regarding some houses on Ferris Street and the state of the construction there with some specific issues. He told me at that time that someone would get over to the homeowners and do a site review, talk to the homeowner. That didn't happen. The homeowner called me again today to ask me, what was going on. So I'm putting it back with you, and I know I did speak with you a few days later. You then said you were going to be sending letters out to the homeowners. Maybe you could give us a recap of where we're at with all of that, just an update?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Desmarais. We're looking at, Peters is still working in the area. They have a few sump pumps to still hook up in people's basements. What we'll be doing is releasing a letter to indemnify the city upon completion of the project to all properties that we've completed work on. So that will be happening probably in spring now, unless we're able to get those sump pumps completed quicker. So what I can do is I can forward that letter to you all and just make sure that you're happy with how that's laid out. And if there are any issues with specific homeowners, you can feel free to pass those on to me and I'll take a look and make sure that I can respond to them this week. Okay, that would be handy to be able to do that, but would it be possible for us to send out a letter just updating every resident on what is going on? I mean, you can understand their frustration. All they see is work that is unfinished, and they're hearing nothing from any city official. They call me and I say, well, you know what, I'll pass along the concern, and then I get an answer and I give them back the answer, but still they don't see any action. So possibly you could send them a letter, and they have that way they have something in writing going right to their home saying this is what it is. Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we could do that. Okay, thank you. That was my first one. And my second one would go to Nicole, and having to do with the camps and that sort of thing that we're finding around people living rough. I know that you did some investigation on some of them that were found after we did our tour. The mayor and Councillor Kenny and Councillor Butters and I went out and did the tour, and we weren't able to find one that day, but the subsequent day there were some found. So could you give us an update on where that's all at, what's been done, and what's likely to be the next steps? Thank you.
I'll have to handle that one if that's okay. Through your worship to Councillor Desmarais, I probably can provide a more fulsome update than Nicole, because although she was at a meeting, I did make some progress on this issue. Specifically, about a week and a half ago, maybe more, I guess a couple weeks ago now, we had a meeting that involved a couple city departments, including parks, roads, because sometimes these camps, I guess for lack of a better term, of trespassers are on city road allowances, as well as bylaw, Seaway, police, our law firm, Seaway is a big property owner, Vale Inco is a large property owner, and I think that might be it. But I reserve the right to add to that list if I can think of anyone. And basically we tried to arrange two things. We tried to determine, number one, a protocol for getting reports of this type of activity into the city so that we could address the activity as fast as possible. One of the reasons is that because we hear reports, especially on social media, where people are talking amongst themselves and assuming that the city has a level of awareness. But if it's not actually taking place on the city's social channels, we sometimes aren't aware of it. So sometimes we hear that we've known about it for a long time when in fact we haven't. The second reason is that we can have a more immediate response if we can determine who the actual owner of the property is. So for example, there was one that took us a few days to get to because it was originally reported as being on a trail, then it was reported as being on a road allowance. I understand that this isn't a problem for the public, but that's two different departments in the city. And finally, we found out that it was private property, and it was in fact industrial property that was vacant. So what we need, number one, is a reporting protocol, and I can say unequivocally that if people are aware of camps or encampments, active or abandoned on any kind of property in the city, that it should be reported to the bylaw enforcement officers at the city by calling City Hall or emailing bylawenforcement@portcolborne.ca. That address is monitored by more than one staff person, so you usually get a live person emailing, even if someone's on vacation or whatnot. From there, we can act as a clearinghouse and make sure that the right party is responding to whether it's cleaning up a dump, like illegal dumping that's been left behind, or whether it's removing people that are doing something that they shouldn't be doing, such as living on property that's not zoned to be lived on. The Seaway has been very cooperative. Valet has been very cooperative. Other private property owners have been very cooperative, and we know that we can respond quickly when it's on city property, whether it's roads or parks. So for that reason, we feel that we've made a lot of progress. We think that it's an issue that doesn't rear its head as much during cold weather, so we're coming up to a time of year when it might be a little less reports of this activity, but that was the determination of that, and we expect to have another meeting in spring in advance of the nice, at the tail end of winter, before spring springs, so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page, all of those agencies. But the main message I would like to, there's two messages really. One is that as much as this is an issue in the city, it's not as pervasive a problem as some people have implied. The police have identified 4 to 5 individuals who are trespassing and moving from one property to another in order to avoid or evade capture, or I guess removal. Capture, we don't really capture people. Removal.
Good idea.
So it's not, a systemic problem, but it is a problem that we have to deal with. And the second takeaway is to absolutely use that email address to report it for the fastest response from the city or the private property owner. And I'll answer any questions if there are any.
That answers my question. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions to Mr. Louie on this subject? There being none, thank you, Mr. Louie, for a comprehensive response. I appreciate that. Any other councilors' reports or inquiries? There being none, are there any staff responses to previous councilors' inquiries? Yes, Chief.
Your Worship, I don't have any responses to council's inquiries. I just want to make the public aware of the fact that the free carbon monoxide smoke alarm program has been extended through the month of November. That's because of the good support we received from the community as well as Enbridge. I will also mention that our percentages are kind of stuck at 39%, which is better than what they were a year or so ago, but haven't improved over the last number of months. That was till the end of September. We can't count October and November because of the program and how it affects. I would also like to add, if I could, Your Worship, that how important it is for people to phone and get assistance from us. We continue to have people found that aren't compliant during the course of our other work when unfortunate emergencies occur in homes. And I will tell you, quite frankly, if we catch you, we charge you. You need to call us to get your help, get our help to be able to assist you in keeping your home safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions of Chief Cartwright? There being none, are there any other inquiries or responses by staff to any other issue? There being none, thank you very much. Move on now, consideration of items requiring separate discussion. Again, we had 4 delegations who who we will address when we discuss that specific item on the agenda. The first item is item number 2, Councilor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Corporate Services Department, Finance Division, Report 2018-146, subject Welland Transit Renewal Agreement for Port Colborne Transit Services.
You're making a recommendation there? Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councilor Kenny?
Okay.
Discussion?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I looked at this because I had a question about it. I read the report and I didn't really see anything stating whether staff or the transit committee did an in-depth look at other possible providers and to see what was out there, what the costs would be, what the services could be. I didn't see that, and I'm wondering if they did do that. That's what I'm asking.
Mr. Sinas?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councilor Demeray. No, the committee and staff didn't look at other alternative sources, and the reason for that is due to the fact that with the regional transit still working on who's going to do what and how they're going to look at taking over some of the transit systems, the link, for example. There's they're bringing forward to their budget process at the region for them to take over, potentially take over the link between Port Colborne and Welland. So because they're still looking at a whole regional system, and it may take a couple more years before they still get, there was a report on tonight's agenda about where they are with regard to the intermunicipal transit and how they're moving forward. So at this point, we didn't feel that it was worth looking at other alternatives because the alternative is the region, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilor Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add to what Peter said as a member of the Transit Committee. We and the Mayor, you sit on there as well. All options were looked at. We're doing a pilot now for, I think it's, what is it, Peter, till pilot are we extending for 4 months? But anyways, there's two representatives there, one from the region and then one from Welland Transit. And they're pretty optimistic by next summer, we're actually going to have a regional transit system. And I always say, before you get the GO train in Niagara, you better figure out a way to get transit worked out. And most of the committee members were in favor of it. So and we have money, a little bit of money tucked away in one of those little accounts that Peter has, you know, Mr. Magician, yeah. And so we're okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kenny. Any further questions, Mrs. Demeray? That's it? Okay. Any other questions on the issue? Being none, move on to item number 4. Oh, we have to vote. Yes. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Number 4, Mr. Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Engineering and Operations Department, Engineering Division, Report 2018-149, subject tendering for project 2018-03, water meter and meter chamber installations, 2 locations.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councilor Kenny. Discussion. Councilor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I brought this up for 3 reasons. And one, I think I'll ask the CAO to explain in case someone's looking at this and they know this council is in a lame duck situation and how the heck are we spending $210,000? So I wonder if the CAO could tell everyone how we're doing that.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Bodner, and I did make a little notation there in the body of this report, which is available on the city's website. This is a job, so this is the award, a report recommending the award of a tender to install 2 water meters, but imagine water meters like the size of this desk, not like the size of your house, into industrial operations. And these have been on the books for several years through the water budget that is approved annually. So in 2 different years, we approved 2 different water meters and then went about the business of acquiring the industrial water meters and finding a contractor to install them. This is a big job that's taken several years to get off the ground because we need to put these in a large meter pit, usually in the road allowance, but in one of the cases, because there's not enough room in the road allowance, it actually has to be done on private property, which is unusual and came with some of its own legal wranglings. So we're just finally getting to the task of actually putting these, or awarding this job and getting these put in the ground now. So these are, council cannot spend unbudgeted funds of $50,000 or more. Council can't sell any kind of unbudgeted property worth $50,000 or more because there's been an election and there's a new council coming. So it would have to wait for the next council. However, these are jobs that were already approved well in advance in 2 different water budgets. And what we're asking you to approve today is awarding the job to the successful bidder. The jobs are about $40,000 above the amount that's budgeted, but staff is recommending that that money come from the water reserve, which is there for exactly that purpose of helping us to finish jobs that don't have quite enough assigned to them because of the inflation of pricing out these jobs a couple of years ago and finally get the shovel in the ground this year or next year. So for that reason, all we're asking council for today is $40,000 to award the 2 jobs to the 1 bidder. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay.
Any other questions of Mr. Louie, perhaps? No. Mr. Bodner?
I have more on this one, though, Mr. Mayor, so.
Oh, that's what I meant, on this issue.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so Mr. Louie also answered one of my questions, where's this coming from? And it's coming from a surplus in the water budget. Is that the right terminology, Peter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bodner, it's coming from the water capital budget.
Water capital budget.
Of 2018.
Okay. And the other reason I brought this up is that there's a pretty good hope that this is actually going to save us money and it's going to pay for this in a very short time, because there could be some cross-contamination and not real contamination. Not the water's not contaminated. I mean, the water could be going from a fire hydrant, so to speak, and being used for other things where that isn't metered. So there's a good chance we can recoup this money. So I just wanted to put that out there too, showing that we are doing something with the water billing. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So what is the response officially to those assembled here this evening?
I think
the general public?
Sure. So I think that's true. I mean, the city does, this is a historic issue where industry has been on a traditional type of water meter. We do have a new type of water meter that we require industrial users to put in place for new construction, but the city has to sort of catch up on past ones. So as we go around from, we try to do one per year or one every couple of years in the water budget. And so we're getting a chance to do 2 here, and that does help with water losses because over the years, the meters that are installed in different industrial activities sometimes don't capture all the water that's going into that industrial facility because we've had fire services go in parallel to water services. And, over time, sometimes a plumber makes the wrong connection or there's some kind of, one system is used for the fresh water system instead of the fire system. So this is a way of taking it back to the property line and making sure that everything that goes through that lateral from the mains to the end user does in fact hit the water bill. And that helps everyone because it makes sure that everybody's paying for the right piece of the pie.
Thank you, Mr. Louie. Councilor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How soon will we know if, once this is put into place, how soon will we know if what its effectiveness is in terms of our prior water loss problems?
Mr. Schabowski, you're in position to respond to that.
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Butters. We should be able to know relatively quickly. these properties are metered right now, but we're gonna be metering them right at the property line, so we'll be able to tell if there's any difference in the metering itself. Is a large length of pipe in between those 2 meters, so it's always possible, like Councillor Bodnar was saying, there could be something off of there, or there could also be leaks that are occurring. There's quite a few different issues that could appear, so this will help us determine exactly if there is leakage and at what point it is. So we should be able to tell relatively quickly, within a year for sure, but we can probably isolate it down to each quarter as well.
I'll be really interested to know what the results of that is. Thank you.
Yep.
Mrs. Emery, did you have a question?
No, I didn't.
Steve, we're replacing the meter, but also are there water lines that have to be replaced with this operation?
There is, it's not as simple as just, it's actually, we're not replacing, but we're actually adding them. So there'll be 2 brand new meters, 2 brand new chambers. There'll be lots of rock removal in there. We have to move some guide rails around, put some culvert in. It's a little extensive for what we're doing here, but this is the only way to do it. We're limited to space to where the chambers can go. So it's definitely a benefit to the municipality, though, to be able to track the water at this location.
Thank you. Any other questions? Call for the vote on the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Next item is item number 7. Mr. Bodnar, you pulled that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development Department, Planning Division Report 2018-138. Subject, Site Alteration Permit, Port Colborne Quarries.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Butters? At this time, I'd like to call upon Mr. Wells, who was the first delegate on this issue. Welcome, Harry. Fine. Okay, Mr. Wells?
Mayor, council, staff, yes?
Mr. Wells, is this a button on, the red button? Good, thank you.
Get used to it here. I will. Thank you for allowing me to speak to this again tonight. What we're looking at, okay. Oh, there we go. I can use the mouse. This mouse will. Okay. Okay, here we go. We'll try this one again. Thank you. I realize I only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to go really quick, try to blast through these things. What we're looking at is Port Colborne Quarry's proposal for the rehabilitation of Pit 1, and regardless of whether it is a condition of the site plan agreement with the city or a condition of the license for 444, or not, it will be a very positive for Port Colborne Quarries, Ward 4, and the city of Port Colborne, if it is completed the right way, and that's the key issue. Reclaiming the area of Pit 1 for compatible development would be economically beneficial and responsible. Port Colborne Quarries proposes to rehabilitate Pit 1 by placing approximately 14 million tons of inert fill over a 20-year span to the pre-existing grades prior to the excavation of Pit 1, and then develop the reclaimed Pit 1 area for mixed-use industrial that includes heavy industrial operations. Council has looked at the application for the permit. They have come back and said that there are only two considerations that council has to make. The first consideration is that the site plan permit is for a 20-year period when the bylaw for the site plan alteration only contemplates a 6-month period. So that's that time frame of 20 years that has to be considered for this. The next one that they claim should be considered is that the fee for that is determination of an applicable fee for a 20-year period as compared to a 6-month period for the placement as contemplated by the bylaw. So that's what council is looking at considering. Well, I believe there are more things that should be considered. One of the first things that I believe should be considered is the rehabilitation for mixed-use industrial, including heavy industry, and whether that is comparable to a passive recreational lake as agreed to in the site plan agreement clause 23 and 14 of the 1982 site plan agreement. Also required under the Aggregate Resources Act for the licensing is to rehabilitate to a compatible pre-existing state. So my question to council is this type of an industry which could be put there compatible with this? It's not comparable in my mind, and it's not comparable to a park. If it was filled up with inert fill and converted to a park, it's not comparable to a residential development area which exists in the area. So that was one consideration I was thinking. The other one is the consideration that council needs to make is that the final use of the facility or the quarry, and what that would be is compatible with the surrounding land uses as would be a passive recreational lake as agreed to in the same site plan agreement. So if we look at those, so is this type of industry, which could be put there under heavy industry, is that compatible with agriculture, which is located to the north of the facility? Is that comparable to agricultural soybean growing, which is south, adjacent to the quarry? Is that comparable to high-density development, which is adjacent to the southeast and south of Pit 1, or southeast of Pit 1 and south of Pit 2? Is that comparable or compatible with the residential areas on Second Concession, Chippewa Road and 140? I do not believe in my mind that they are compatible with those types of areas. And third concession, or consideration that council needs to make, will all, and I emphasize all, the material, being the fill, entering the facility in Pit 1 actually be laboratory tested and certified by the source site prior to being accepted. Shouldn't council consider a condition of the permit that requires Port Colborne Quarries implement a quality control and QC program to ensure the levels of the contamination do not exceed the minimum levels of Table 1, which they are saying they will meet. And the reason I say this consideration has to be taken in place is because of what we know about the fill. The fill material will be obtained from sources locally, regionally, and potentially further afield. This means it could come from outside of the country. So does council want Pit 1 to be a dump for U.S. waste fill. All material entering the facility will be laboratory tested and certified by the source site prior to being accepted. The source site might benefit from not sampling a contaminated area, and there is nothing ensuring they won't conduct selective sampling for their benefit. In my experience, I have had 33 years waste management experience building and setting up sites, and out of that 33 years, I put 12 years into operating of a Terrell landfill and quarry, and I can tell you that there have been far too many incidences where we've had generator sites trying to slip things in. We've had too many sites, too many times we've had to reject material. And we put in programs in order to stop that. More about the fill. The fill, according to what we were presented, is excessive spoil material being removed from active construction sites. So these are sites where potential spills could occur, contamination could occur, that otherwise would be directed to municipal landfills. And that's right on page 7 of the report. Spoil material is defined by the Webster Dictionary as an earthen material that is surplus to requirements or unsuitable for reuse fill. And embankments such as unsuitable rock, soil material, or material that is contaminated. Generally, spoiled material going to municipal landfills is regarded as waste, so essentially this is turning Pit 1 into a landfill. If the material was originally going there to a waste landfill, and now we've changed it and moved it to somewhere else, then that's similar to a waste landfill. More about the fill. All the fill will meet MOC Table 1 standards for soil, ground, and sediment and groundwater. Part 15 of the MOECP, Environmental Protection Act, on page 5. The fill must satisfy 5 pages of contaminants criteria, all in parts per million. So there's over 90 constituents in that list that have to be complied with. So, using an example, if we look at this jar of jelly beans next to Barb Butters, I would ask any one of you to have some. Barb, would you want to pass them out? To have a jelly bean. Well, I don't know if you're lucky, Barb. 10 of those jelly beans were contaminated with benzoapyrene. Which ones? But they're all good. I'm telling you, they're all good. Exactly. Benzoapyrene, according to the MSD standard sheets, statements, may cause an allergic skin reaction, may cause genetic defects, may cause cancer, may endanger fertility or the unborn child. And these Table 1 levels for benzoapyrene are 0.05 ppm for agricultural areas. It's 0.3 ppm for commercial residential areas. And it's 0.01 ppm for groundwater. And what that means, to exemplify that, is that if you took 1 drop of water and you took 1/10,000th of that drop of water and put it in a bucket of water, you would exceed that table guideline. So 1 drop in 10 liters is 1 part per million. 0.001 drop of benzopyrene in a bucket of water would put you outside of that criteria. Not very much. Nothing that's significant enough there. And benzoapyrene is not something that you don't find around. I just easily took these 2 case examples, one in Welland where a parkland was being converted to a residential land which has exceedances of benzoapyrene. Second one was a construction site in Niagara Falls. Again, same sort of scenario. They did a survey of they did an analysis of the soils they were removing. Sure enough, benzoapyrene exceedance. So it's not something that doesn't happen, and it could happen here. that where a construction site was taking place, and somehow we missed the jelly bean, and it got into the site. So neither the report by the planning department nor the IBA group mentioned that Pit 1 has a permit for the MOECP to take water. Leachate from the inert fill and filling operations during the rehabilitation process could negatively impact the vulnerable aquifer. Council needs to consider how the vulnerable aquifer is going to be protected. The comprehensive zoning bylaw in section 2.3.1, source water protection, prohibits certain types of uses within the intake protection zones. Since the vulnerable aquifer is a source of drinking water for residents and livestock in Ward 4, Council needs to consider giving that water source the same protection as IPZ-1 or IPZ-2 water sources for Port Colborne's urban area before approving the permit.
Mr. Wells, you're coming near to your 10 minutes.
I appreciate that. I'm going to rush. There are many more considerations that Council needs to take on whether this complies with the, or is consistent or compliant with the PPS, the OP, MOE-6. Council doesn't know if the proposal is consistent with the PPS. Council doesn't know if it's consistent or compliant with the OP 2007 because they haven't seen documentation. They haven't seen the applications for the zoning change.
Mr. Wells, you're coming to the, or have come to the end of your presentation.
Okay.
You're dealing with the material there. Could you file that with the clerk?
Yes, it will be filed with the clerk. Yep.
Okay.
One last statement with regards to this. What we're looking at here in the slide is the boundaries of Pit 1, where Pit 1 is the outside square, the MOE document, MOE separation distance of 300 minimum. If we fill that in, fills in the yellow, which leaves only that small section which could be zoned for heavy industrial. Everything outside of that would have been considered impacted by the site, by the MOE. I will submit this. There's much more that I could have gone into. 10 minutes is not enough time to sufficiently provide council with knowledge in regards to approving this. I do suggest that council consider further time on this subject and considerations in regards to some of the issues I have.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
And you will turn those into the clerk this evening? Yes. Okay, fine. Mr. Halinga? Welcome, Jack. Come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and citizens of Port Colborne. Mr. Wells had a tab that said points for consideration. I also have points for consideration. I'll start with the very first. Is this site alteration permit application a site alteration permit application or a prelude to a rezoning and OP amendment request? The Planning Department Report 2018-138, page 2 reads, as confirmed by legal counsel, paragraph 14 references rehabilitation as a condition of licensing, not as a site plan agreement condition. The license is correctly for Pit 2 and 3. That's not stated is that Clause 23 refers to Pit 1 and requires a rehabilitation program compatible to Pit 2 and 3. According to the definition of rehabilitation, refer to the Aggregate Resources Act, which I believe Mr. Wells also referred to, that it must be a compatible use close to what it was prior to the licensing or in accordance with the license which was compatible to passive recreation for pit 2 and 3. The site alteration bylaw does not reflect a project of this magnitude, but was more likely established for some minor lot filling. As referenced in the report, it was created as a result of a filling incident, which was in the magnitude of 1 meter, and here we are talking 15 meters or thereabouts. There is a slight error in Planning Department report, page 1, third paragraph. The date of the application says 2017. I believe it should be 2018. And an error in the Planning Department report, page 2, the calculation of fees for 67 hectares. If you go through the arithmetic, it should be 1,420, not 1,320. But the site alteration fees, according to the bylaw for 6 months, should be $1,000 maximum, or as amended in future bylaw updates, and be charged every 6 months. The permit should allow the city to amend the site alteration bylaw and the fees, and require the quarry to meet all revised requirements on the next 6-month renewal date, subject to satisfactory performance. And that's probably the key, the satisfactory performance. Allowing one fee for up to 20 years is contrary to the site alteration bylaw. Allowing this is a precedent for such requests by others in the future. Is this application in any way going to recoup the missed fee for that material that was already hauled into Pit 1 since this spring and continues to the day of the writing of these points? The long-term proposal is to haul in approximately 14 million plus tons of clean inert fill. This is in excess of 700,000 truckloads. The current proposed fee amounts to approximately 0.2 cents per truckload or 0.01 cents per ton, generously allowing 20 tons to a truckload. The proponent promises to release and indemnify the city with respect to any liability that may arise. There is no bond or other financial assurance of this promise. The estimated time could be upwards of 20 years. The range of upwards is not defined. It could even be beyond 20, just like the quarry extraction. Who will remember the date when the 20 years are up? By having a renewal requirement every 6 months, the city will be able to monitor the progress and conformity to the site alteration plan and recoup the cost of conducting the continuous monitoring. The NPCA has control over a section of proposed for filling, and their input, requirements, and agreement should be provided before any filling is allowed. You get halfway through and then you find you don't have their approval, then what are you going to do with what you've already brought in? The MNRF has identified an area of natural and scientific interest from the earth science category and should be addressed before approval for filling is granted. There's no risk assessment, no risk management plan, no emergency response plan. There are no geotechnical reports that identify the stability of the fill for future infrastructure construction. There are no hydrogeological reports that investigate the impact of the filling on the high vulnerable aquifer. There is no progressive rehabilitation plan provided, no interim grading drainage plan, and no seeding proposal. The current requirement for rehabilitation compatible to passive water recreation is currently stipulated in the site plan agreement should be referenced, as this is registered on title for the property. How the filling fulfills the previously mentioned requirement and how it will be used to achieve this requirement should be defined. The permit should be stage specific. They have 6 stages identified, and the city should retain a right to withdraw further approvals if any stage is not completed and rehabilitated in a timely manner to the satisfaction of the city. The reference to potential subsequent use or rezoning should not be included in a site alteration plan. That is the requirement for a zoning or OP amendment, unless it is consistent with the site plan agreement. And the site plan agreement is compatibility with the adjacent properties. In the last paragraph on page 2, there is a reference to discussions regarding a zoning change application for Pit 2. Pit 2 is under license with MNRF with a stipulated progressive rehabilitation to passive water recreation. I've lived there 44 years, and I would like to see what the definition of progressive is. The region already commented on the 2016 applications for pits 1 and 2 in their letter dated December 21, 2016, and I gave the clerk a copy of that. This application is similar to the application under D140516 and D090116, which was for pits 1 and 2, and this application is for pit 1 only without stating the intention to get consideration in the future for rezoning. The IBI report describes the surrounding land uses. The north describes setbacks well enough from the second concession right-of-way. Can I show the plan that I provided? The site, pits 1 and 2 sites?
Part of your presentation?
Yes. There it is. Yeah, that's good. The north boundary shows the property lines of properties adjacent to Pit 1 between Highway 140 and Snyder Road. I don't know if the planners actually drove that stretch of road, because it says that they were well enough from second concession right-of-way. There are at least 6 homes there that are less than 15 meters from the north property line of the right-of-way. So that is probably a generalization and does not apply to all of the residences. The east does not include the residences along Snyder Road and the residential development property to the southeast. The south does not include the residents surrounded by the agricultural use. And the west does not indicate that west of the right-of-way property line of Highway 140 is zoned residential and residential development. The site is surrounded by current and proposed residential uses. When comments are stated as fact, they should be complete and accurate. If all of the promises are kept, much as Mr. Wells said, this does not look like a bad idea, subject to addressing the above considerations. A commitment now to obtain an approval with a subsequent application for a change is a misrepresentation of intent. There are too many unanswered questions at this time. This application should be considered further and deferred to the next council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Halinga. Any questions for Council? Council Butters.
This is through our staff. Is that okay?
I'm sorry? Yeah.
Through you to our staff. So, Dan, you've heard all of, between Harry and Jack's presentation and all the different points that he made, and I wrote down as fast as I could.
Actually, if I may, Mr. Mayor, the deputy clerk has a copy of this.
Thank you.
That's really good, because I couldn't write down quickly enough. I know I missed one or two. So my question for you, Dan, is when you heard that list, no risk management thing, no geotech, no hydrogeological, nothing on progressive rehab, interim drainage, seeding, all that big long list that Jack listed off. Does that not kind of raise some concern from your perspective that we should be looking at all of those things and including that, making sure we have our bases covered in this application, and especially when it comes to the duration of 6 months to 20 years, like the way that hits me right off the bat is like, oh, I don't think so. Like, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. I do like the idea of a renewal built in. That keeps everybody honest, I think. But, so could you just answer my question about Jack's list first?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butters and all of council. Very comprehensive presentations. I would not be in a position to comment specifically point by point. If council wants to defer the matter, it would be something that I would take the opportunity to report back to council on instead of me flying off the seat of my pants. Some valid points, but there are some, obviously, I have rebuttals, but I would save those for an actual report.
Any idea of how much time would be required for your further consideration?
Mr. Mayor, I would believe that it would take at least a month's time to go through each point that was made to then properly respond back to council.
Thank you. Mrs. Butters, are you finished?
I am for now, sir. Thank you.
Mrs. Demery, and then Mrs. Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like two things to happen. One, I'd like to have a date scheduled at some point in the future where council could have a proper education on this matter, because it's quite significant, and I think that we need to have more information on this. And these are not necessarily simple things to understand. It's quite complicated and quite layered, and I think we should know more. That, and I'd like to move a deferral to a time such as we would already have that education, and staff would have time to put everything together for us.
Fine. Let's cut the deferral. And does cut.
There's a second deferred, there's been deferred once, and it only deferred one meeting, it should have been deferred one more time. I think that's the problem.
I think she's aware of that.
So defeat it and bring it back in another.
We've had a motion to defer. We have not had that seconded yet. But if there is a seconder for that motion.
I want to answer my question though.
Well, that doesn't, if we have a seconder for the deferral, then there's no more discussion.
Sure, that's why no one's going to second it until I ask my question.
Well, I'm going to ask if anybody I saw a hand down here waving at me. Is there a seconder for that motion? Mr. Main has seconded the motion. So this concludes the discussion on the issue. Call for the question. All those in favor?
To defer?
To defer. And that's unanimous. Unfortunately, this matter's going to be deferred, or we're going to defer it to a certain date.
January?
That would depend on when we could be educated, when Dan could pull all that together. It would be his to call.
We would like to defer it, Dan, until a date that we would have all the information back on your comments, on your comments and his comments, and Mr. Wells' comments as well. When can you give us a date that you think you'd be ready?
Mr. Mayor, I could get something back to council in the new year.
Well, first meeting in the new year, second meeting in the new year? We don't want to. We want to deal with the issue eventually, but we want to have all facts and figures and explanations with us.
I'm comfortable going with the second meeting in January.
Okay, second meeting in January.
Are you confident we'll have that by that time?
I hope so.
I'm sorry, sir?
I said I hope so. I can't guarantee it because.
Well, then you would ask to change it to later.
Okay.
Well, she'll be good. Yes, Mr. Botter.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like you to consider not putting a timeline on it.
Yes.
And putting a little more vague timeline. If we're talking a 20-year experiment,
Yeah.
I don't care if it takes Dan another month to get all the facts. I don't want to have him feel rushed or we don't get the whole thing. And if we put a timeline, the danger is something comes up and we can't do it. So I agree, it should be done
As quick as possible.
You know,
As soon as
soon. But for 20 years, I can wait another
Yeah.
month or whatever it takes for Dan to get everything together and come to us.
I have some sympathy for your comments, Mr. Bodner, but I also appreciate that the matter has to come to conclusion in the future. And I say I agree we should have a deferral to a sufficient time to have the responses, but we don't have any indication how long this is going to take. But I would suggest that we don't want it to go on forever, and that this will definitely go over to the new council. And can we?
The first quarter.
We have a comment here from the clerk that perhaps defer it for at least the first quarter of the new council. That should be roughly 3 months.
Gives you lots of time.
Everyone have any comments or agreement with that suggestion? Deferral for the first cycle of for the new council, roughly 3 months.
Yeah.
Do we have to change that deferral? We've moved for a deferral. Do we have to?
Well, I mean, you didn't, in the motion, they didn't say a deferred
That's right.
time. This is just direction to
This is
staff.
just direction, yeah. We're good.
Fine, it's covered then. Okay. To those who are here from the IBI group and to members of the public who are here to, because of their concern for the issue, I apologize, but it would appear this matter will not be concluded this evening, be deferred at least to the first quarter of the new council. Thank you very much for your presence.
It's not there. The information is not there.
Apologies for those who are here because of this issue. Okay.
No, he didn't. That's what I said.
Move on to item number 8. Mr. Bodner, that is your recommendation?
There's some unhappy people, but I'd rather do it right. It's way too important, yeah. You do it right. Do it once, do it right. Yeah, well, just, like I said, there are too many missing pieces. It's just like a half a report, you know? The whole, it's a complex issue.
Mr. Bodner?
Got it, Mr. Mayor,
So all
thank
those
you.
things here is I was
Planning and
back-
Development Department, Planning Division Report 2018-142, subject cannabis dispensary and production.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Kent, not Councillor Kenny, Councillor Butters. Okay, at this time, we'd like to call upon Mr.
He
Thomas
forgot it
Hill
already.
of the Paramedica Group. Come forward.
Yeah.
Have 10 minutes to make your presentation, sir.
As quickly as possible. I didn't bring a presentation with me, so this is a bit of an update and just some questions, I guess, around some of the background on the decisions to defer. First of all, thank you for the time, Mayor Maloney, councillors, staff, and residents remaining. We appreciate the time today to be able to speak to this matter. As an update, obviously, I think you're all aware we have our site plan approval in place from council. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. We're working through the final stages of getting our building permits in order to build the production facility for Pharmedica on site. Can you hear okay?
I can, I'm not sure everybody can.
Members of the public, we're listening to a presentation, but we can't hear because of the chatter. So I'd ask members of the audience to...
I guess some of what we're looking for is a little bit of a clarification. As it's written, it discusses retail and production, or retail production. So is there I guess my questions to the council is, do you see a difference between the two? Is this looking to not have dispensaries in town, or is it to stop further marijuana companies from producing in town?
Mr. Aquilina, do you have any comments on...
Who wrote the...
Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't speak for council, but I would believe because of the provincial legislation that does not allow private retail sales of cannabis is one of the reasons why this report is brought forward for council's consideration, and the fact that we don't actually have regulations that deal with the actual growing of cannabis for commercial purposes in place. The only zoning provisions we have right today is for medical marijuana production facilities.
Mr. Hill, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that answers the question. So, as we all know, the business is changing fast, as well as so are the rules. Recently, with the rules, with the new Ontario government coming in, with Doug Ford taking over, they've allowed for a retail location at each grow site for each licensed producer as part of the Cannabis Act for Ontario. Our plan, as hasn't been submitted yet, which is why we're here, but our plan was to build an education center and potentially a retail location on our site on Highway 3 as well. So that's where we're here to, I guess, to discuss just sort of what the impact of that would be. As we said, the rules have just changed recently, so it wasn't part of our original site plan application. The new rules with the legalization of cannabis have also changed quite a bit as well. So as a licensed producer, we will be able to sell into the retail market. I don't know how that impacts things from the council's perspective, but we will be able to do that. Our concentration is still going to be on medical. We are looking at that as our main source of income, but the retail market's something that we can't ignore. So I guess what we're looking for here today is to discuss the opportunity of potentially still applying for and opening an education and retail store on our site as well. I guess this is being deferred for 1 year while you're figuring out the rules and everything around it. Is that correct?
Track line.
Through Mr. Mayor to the presenter, the 1 year interim control would be up to a year to then report back to council within that year's time. If it could be completed within the year's time, council then has an opportunity to extend that interim control for another additional year, and that is it. But the intent is to report back to council on the official plan policies and any of the zoning impacts for any land use compatibility for any production and sale of cannabis.
Okay. All right. According to the rules in Ontario, April 1st is when private retail will be allowed, so I think that gives us a little bit of time. Obviously, as we said, the rules have been changing pretty quickly, so we're trying to move and adjust with them as they change as well, too. So we would likely like to continue the discussions, potentially not today, but to continue discussions and submit the proper applications accordingly to expand on our current property down the line when acceptable. And I do apologize, I've never actually been through a town council meeting before, so I'm not sure how protocols go, so I'll apologize in advance if I do anything that I'm not supposed to be doing up here, so. Is there a question? Sorry, Mr. Potter.
Go ahead, Mr. Potter.
So not necessarily to the presenter, although I'm sure they want to know how this will impact their future. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dan, if we pass this and they're looking at doing something before the year is up, are they then excluded from doing anything if we pass this? So I think everybody should know what the rules are. And
I think that's kind of what we're trying to clarify, is just where that leaves us with regard to a retail potential.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bonner, if council approves the interim control bylaw, I would then report back to council when my review is completed. Now, it's not to say that it's going to be a year. It could be the next 6 months. But I think what is necessary is to review the fact that we heard this evening that things are changing. The fact is that the province does not want to have retail sales anywhere unless it's through the government approval scenario. So I think it would be prudent to actually reply back to council as to what the actual rules are in place, and then put together any sort of zoning changes and official plan changes to make this a reality.
Mr. Bonner?
Okay for now, I'll listen to the discussion.
Mr. Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dan. Dan, if we were to pass this, this would in fact be the opt-out option that's in accordance with the provincial government and their the terms that they've set out?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Demery, no, this does not include the council question that will be coming to council early December for the new council, if the municipality wants to opt in or opt out of retail sales, because that needs to be to the province by January 22nd.
Okay, thank you. And I would wonder why we wouldn't just go for the opt-out option, and then you could do all the study that you want to get everything, all the ducks in a row, and because we can opt in at any time. We only get one option to opt out, though. So I just wonder why we'd be doing this if we could just go to the one step and have it all accomplished.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Demery, I do not want to put the council in the position to make a decision tonight. The question regarding opting in, opting out should be something that the new council should make a determination on.
And Ms. Butters, did you have your hand up? And then Mr. Doucette.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dan, this interim bylaw would also prevent sales out of some of the greenhouses, wouldn't it?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Butters, right now there is no retail sales that are permissible in the municipality because the provincial government has a freeze on allowing any private sales occurring unless you're regulated through the province through a licensing process.
Well, and as everybody says, this is like a shifting landscape. You wake up one morning and things change quick. That's for sure.
We're living it every day.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for the answer.
Mr. Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. With this decision, we are now impacting a company that is prepared, has been working on it for at least a year, if not two, and we are now going to impose something here on a good citizen who's going to pay taxes to the city. And that's not fair. I can see if someone comes in and wants to do it, okay, I can handle that. I have a serious concern with us imposing something like this on someone that's been preparing for this and is ready to go, and now we're going to change the rules right from under. It's bad enough that the government of Ontario is changing the rules on this individual, on this group of individuals, but now we're going to do the same thing, and I don't think that's fair. And I mean, we said for how long did we say we were open for business? This is business. If it doesn't come here, it's going to go somewhere else. This is business. Why are we now imposing something on a business that's been preparing and wanting to come to Port Colborne for the past 2 years? I don't think it's fair. I think we have to rethink this. Now, if we want to pass this and say it's for anyone new coming in, I can handle that and let the new council take over that. But to impose it on someone like this, no. I think it's wrong. I really believe it's wrong. And I really believe that it's a fly in the ointment of saying we're open for business.
Thank you, Mr. Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dan. Dan, can you verify what Councillor Doucette is saying? Will it actually prevent Pharmatica from moving ahead? Not the retail sales part, but moving ahead on their production facility.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bodner, Tonight is the first night I've heard for Medica that they're looking to actually get into the retail sales of cannabis. That is, because presently, right now, they are approved for medical marijuana.
Okay, so my question is, don't worry about the retail. Can they move ahead of doing what they've been working on for the last 2 years or 3 years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bonner, no, they are already approved for medical marijuana production facility.
Right.
That use is permitted.
Okay, so they can move ahead and
That's
do it.
correct.
Okay.
Any new medical marijuana facility, if council approves the interim control bylaw and then makes an amendment to include medical marijuana facilities, that would need to be done. Because that's, right now, it's not part of the interim control bylaw. It's for commercial growers of cannabis.
Right.
I'm separating the two. Medical marijuana is regulated by Health Canada. The commercial production of cannabis is not regulated by Health Canada.
Actually, sorry if I can interject, and it is actually, they're one and the same. Where the licensed producers are sorry to interrupt, but we're able to participate in both sides, both recreational and medical. Only via, not through the sales channel, obviously, at this point in Canada, but we can sell to both markets. So that was one of the concerns that we had as well too, is that our concentration is going to be on the medical market, but the recreational market is a market we can't ignore. So we will be getting products listed with the Ontario Cannabis Store for sale on their sites, and then as other retail begins to come online, we may have products that are available for that as well. So the medical marijuana lines with the new License Act, its licensed producer has sort of changed in that you can be either or both now, is the way that the rules are written now.
The main difference is how it's distributed to those people, so those with prescriptions versus the retail channel. You know, medical patients will get it direct from us. There will be no intermediary. Whereas in a recreational standpoint, you know, today you can order it online only. Come April 1st, there will be municipalities opening up retail stores that people can go to in the province of Ontario.
And again, we have not submitted this as a plan. This is what the new Doug Ford government coming in is just that was where he changed the rules to allow us as a licensed producer the ability to have the retail. So I don't know if I want to call it fortuitous timing, but the timing of this being on the table at this meeting was actually pretty good, because we were just getting prepared to come in and have a discussion with you, Dan, about what it would take to put a retail location potentially on our site.
Yeah, when we saw retail and production on the agenda, we were confused by what that actually meant, to be honest with you, because we saw two different sides of the business, and we weren't sure what was really meant by that. So I appreciate the clarification there.
And it would probably be worthwhile just to give an update on timelines as well, because, I mean, from our perspective, you have time. It's not like, you know, you don't need to make this decision today. We're not asking council to make this decision today. You know, from our standpoint, building permits are in final stages of approval. I think the plan is to come down next week and submit the final drawings and everything. We're 6 months away from building our facility, probably another 9 months away from being into production with Health Canada approvals in place. And that's so, you know, we may still, you know, it might be a year before we're able to open a retail store anyways. I think what we want to do is just make sure that if, you know, we're in a position to be able to open that store, that, you know, it's in agreement with the town of Port Colborne that we're able to do that, and all the requisite rules and everything have been followed and put in place to that point. So
thank you for your comments. The second individual there didn't identify.
Oh, sorry. My name's Toby Pettit. I'm an executive.
He's a director with Farm.
And your address would be care of the...
Yes, I've been in contact with Barbara and Ron a couple of times.
And Barbara has a question now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm really glad that you mentioned what your timelines are. You know, 6 months before building and an additional 9 months from that for starting to production. So what I see about this one is I don't see this as an unfair bylaw. I see this as giving us a chance to let our staff do some really necessary work on what this all means to this municipality anyways. The last thing I would want to do is hurt your company. You guys have been excellent to work with. You've kept Councillor Bodnar and I in the loop. You've kept your neighbors in the loop. You've answered all the questions. You know, whatever you've said you've done, and then you do what you say. So in my book, you've been a really good company. So let's just say that from the get-go, right now.
We expect to continue.
And I want you to be able to do that as well. By the same token, I want to make sure that whatever happens in the city, we give ourselves time to really review and know what the hell we're getting into. Because this is all new stuff, kids. We don't know what's around the next corner. So will support this particular motion on the floor, and give our staff time to bring us back information and data, and let the government figure out what the heck they're doing, and then we'll be able to make good, sound decisions for the city of Port Colborne. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, Mr. Bodnar?
Hey, Mr. Mayor, through you to Dan. Dan, in the options and financial consideration on page 79, there is a thing that says other options. And it says, although regulations in the zoning bylaw are in place for medical marijuana production facilities, council may want to also consider the use for further study as part of the interim control bylaw. Can you give us a Coles Notes version of what that, how that will change what we're looking at right now?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bonner, yes. Presently, right now, we have regulations in place for medical marijuana production facilities. Talks about setback locations from sensitive land uses, talks about the other requirements, i.e. site plan controlled by council. Right now, we do not have any definition in the zoning bylaw for commercial cannabis production. So if the council wants to now include medical marijuana production facilities as part of the freeze, then council will need to do that by way of an amendment, as what that one option contemplates.
Mr. Roddick.
So then if that was to be put in, would that affect PharMedica?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bonner, no, would not, because they're already in existing use.
Right.
It would be for new uses.
So they're kind of like the grandfather. They're already started. They're
already in place already. They're recognized.
Whatever we're talking about tonight, other than the retail part,
Other than the retail side,
is not going to affect them.
No, it would be if someone new wants to come in and propose a medical marijuana facility, the brakes will be put on for a year's time if council wants to include medical marijuana production facilities.
Mr. Bonner.
Again, I'm just going to wait and see whether anybody else has.
You want the last word? I don't. Is there any more discussion on this issue by any members of council? Yes, Ms. Butters.
Would including that affect the private licensed greenhouses? The ones that are operating only under private licenses?
Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Butters, I believe the question is if any individual has a licensed prescription to grow their own personal cannabis. And it would not. It would be a use based on a commercial use if they're growing for more than one person or two or three people above and beyond the license requirements. So you may have existing uses that are, those are grandfathered in because there are no provisions in place for cannabis production facilities. Only medical marijuana facilities, those are recognized in the zoning bylaw that was put in place in 2014. So any other individual or property that is growing medical marijuana, those are grandfathered in, but I don't believe there are any medical marijuana facilities that are in operation. I believe there would be uses that are more geared towards individuals that have up to 1 to 2, 3 licenses.
So it doesn't affect those
It would
ones?
not affect them because they're already in existence.
So what if you're not, what if you're not in existence or in compliance in your area? Would it then?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, it would. You would not be considered a legal use until council then removes the interim control bylaw to deal with medical marijuana production facilities.
Then perhaps we should include those ones.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Butters, that's one of the comments I made, that council may want to consider that.
I think that might be a real good idea. No, I'll put it forward, sure. Because we got to do something about the ones that are
You're proposing an amendment to this item? What is that amendment? Is there a second?
The other option. I'm going to find it. 79. Page 79.
I guess I have one other question, just given that we will be playing in the recreational space potentially. I mean, do we need to sit down and reconsider sort of, I mean, we're listed as a medical marijuana facility. We may be selling into retail markets either in Ontario or beyond. I want to make sure we're in compliance with the city as well, obviously at that point as well. But again, you know, we're probably 9 months away from having crops in ground anyway, so it's not that we don't need a decision today, but I do want to make sure that we are in compliance if we do start, you know, selling into the retail market, whether it's out of our store or into the Ontario Cannabis Store. I just want to make sure that we're in compliance.
Mr. Aquilina, can you comment on that?
Through Mr. Mayor, as was mentioned before, the world in this particular industry is changing. Because my conversation with the Attorney General's office, what we're hearing tonight would not be permissible. We're hearing from Formedica that it would be. So what I've made the comment before, give me some time to actually review what is fact, to then bring that back to council.
So we're not in a position to respond to that.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I think, you know, we have time on our side as much as we were trying to move everything through. I mean, we're not trying to force council into any sort of, you know, rash decisions or anything. We just want to make sure, one, that we stay compliant within the city and, you know, maintain our good citizenship, and then the other side is, you know, obviously be able to operate our business in the manner.
Mrs. Butters, how are we doing?
I'm still looking for this, Dan. Help me out here. You said another option.
Page 79, other options.
Page 79. 4A. Look under 4 options and financial consideration. A, do nothing, and then below that, other options.
I'm not sure how to do it.
Right here.
We can forward, I think Toby forwarded an email earlier that had some links to some regulations, so we can reformulate that email and pass it back through council again.
That's what I'm looking. So through you, Mr. Mayor, back to Dan. So under number 7, will this work, Dan? That that staff be directed to undertake a study of city's official plan, policy, zoning bylaws, standards and regs, and implementation procedures pertaining to retail and medical cannabis production, and report back to council with recommendations?
Through Mr. Mayor, that would be correct.
Okay.
To add
Thank
medical
you.
marijuana production facilities to retail cannabis production.
Is there?
As well in the next paragraph, retail and medicinal, medical.
Yeah.
Because
So
they're
add-
already- well, they already can do that, though. They already can do medicinal.
But there's a difference in the.
It's not for these guys, it's for everybody coming in.
Okay,
So,
let's.
and then adding the same, prohibiting, in that second paragraph, retail and medical on all properties in the city? Is that what?
That's correct. Just to add medical marijuana production facilities.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councilor Demery, are you ready for a vote? Do you want further discussion on that point? No further discussion has been requested on the amendment. Can we call for a vote? All those in favor? All those opposed? Opposed?
That'll be anything.
Mr. Doucette, you're not ready voting? Okay, now can we call for the,
Can I just ask one more question?
go ahead.
And that's just like for new things, right? Right, okay. Anybody who is grandfathered in, that's for new ones, correct?
That's correct. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Butters. For new medical marijuana production facilities, they would not be permissible because those need to be approved by council through site plan control.
Do you have a question, Mrs. Demery? No question. Okay, are you ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion as amended? Opposed? One abstention. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for your time.
Next is item number 10. Mrs. Butters, I believe that was you. Mrs. Butters, are you?
I'm just getting there. I'm sorry. I was on the other, somewhere else. Okay, number 10, memorandum from Scott Louis, Chief Administrative Officer, regarding follow-up from September 10th, 2018 public meeting regarding vandalism.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Mrs. Kenny. Any discussion? Yes, Mrs. Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just really like Scott Louis to talk a little bit about this and to let the public know what these next steps are going to look like. I think this is a real positive thing for the city, and I want to thank him for getting this rolling out of a difficult situation. I think this is going to be very positive, so I think it's good to put it out to the public.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Butters, I guess in terms of an editorial comment, the meeting on September 10th sort of ended without much direction to staff, not much of a roadmap moving forward. I mean, we heard a lot. We all got an earful from the public and even from each other, but there wasn't very much discussion amongst council about what council wanted to see next. So I took it upon myself. I knew nothing wasn't the right answer. So I sort of took it upon myself to, let's call it a working group, strike up a working group based on some of the people who approached the podium and spoke to council, the ward councillors from the ward where most of the activity, the whole municipality needs attention. But we were getting many reports in the downtown area, and so we wanted to make sure the ward councillors were included. And the police bylaw, and because of the social services, this isn't really part of Port Care's mandate, so to speak, but they're sort of the only game in town. I mean, we really need help from mental health, regional public health, other charitable organizations like Salvation Army and some of the shelters, but they're mainly based in St. Catharines or other parts of the region or the province. And because we radiate so far outwards, we often don't get the lion's share of the service. So we brought in Port Care's executive director to help with some insight on that component of it. And this is specifically, vandalism, crime, drug use, sometimes some addictions, and whether it's alcohol or drug dependency. And there is a component of litter. I mean, we heard about needles being scattered in the municipality. We did hear a little bit about squatters or trespassers on property too. And I don't think that that's the only violators of the other activity, but that's a component of it. So, and I reported on that earlier in this meeting too. So we had 2 productive meetings. We talked a lot about, unfortunately, it's not going to be a quick fix. It's going to be an involved fix, and it's going to have to be multi-agency, involving the police and involving others. And we feel we made some progress, but I'll just pick out a couple of highlights if that's okay. Particularly some community safety grants and community watch programs. We are continuing to explore and look into those types of programs, and I do hope to bring more forward in the future. But in particular, some ideas that were talked about were closed circuit cameras in hotspot areas. Now you can't blanket the entire city with cameras, and the other thing that was considered was, should we have security guards at some times of day or in some areas of town? Both of those come with a cost component, and what I've asked council to approve here is basically a budget item where we can get into a non-binding expression of interest. So this isn't a guarantee that we're going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on security, but this is more, or cameras, this is more to see if a company will come in and look at a map of the municipality and say, these are the places that you could deploy a security guard. These are the places you could deploy a security camera, and help us to sort of make that plan and find out what the cost is before we invest, so that council has a handle on what they would be approving if they do approve it. The other thing that we tried to do was some changes to the sort of built infrastructure of the municipality, and this is a tough one. So specifically, we removed some furniture from the downtown area where people were tending to congregate. Let's call them unsavory uses of city property. We want those amenities to be there for our community, but unfortunately they were being misused. So until summer is over, or until winter is over, we've decided to remove some park benches and picnic tables from hot spots, with the hopes that they will go back there if we can address the misuse and address the security through either cameras or security guards. So those are some preliminary steps. We are going to continue to meet. Like I said, we called it a working group so that we don't get bogged down in some of the council, taking several months to get people up and running on the committee. And because many of the people are staff or from a certain agency, I think that it's going to be okay to proceed with the group that I've outlined on this. I guess it's not a report, it's a memo. Outlined on this memo, which is a group that makes sense to me. The police, the BIA, Port Cares, ward councillors, and some of the folks that came up to the podium that very day who have showed an interest in this issue. So that's the baby steps that we want to start with. The other thing that we are going to recommend is a budget request that would be set aside for community safety. I think in much the same way as we have an infrastructure levy where we can address the infrastructure deficit in the municipality, I think we could have a safety levy where we address the safety deficit in the municipality and try to put that money to good use in improving conditions in the community. So if there are any questions, I'd be prepared to answer them, Mr. Mayor.
Question submitted to Louis. Mr. Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Louis. Scott, how are you going to go about structuring the committee again? Is it going to be new people going on there, or are you going to leave it as it stands? How's that going to happen? And when would that happen?
So it's my preference, through the mayor to Councillor Demery, with council's permission, it's my preference to leave the structure much the same. So that is, let the BIA appoint the BIA member, let the NRP appoint the NRP member. Port Cares would presumably be the Port Cares executive director. And I do have these 2 volunteers who have stepped forward, who both appeared as delegates before council that day, and that's Rick Osborne and Fred Davies. If council prefers, I could come back with a staff report in terms of reference. We could cast a net by advertising for members from the public and then go through the approval process that we typically do. But I thought these were the people with the most vested interest in the issue.
Mr. Viner?
I don't think we need to go any further in advertising or anything like that. You kind of said they're baby steps. It's a first start. I'd like to see where this progresses to, see what traction it gets. And if you feel then we need to, for lack of a better word, solidify it more or whatever, but get it going and then you'd have something to talk about, you know, if we want to put somebody else on it. So just my thoughts on it anyways. Thanks.
Any other comment? Mrs. Demery.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. I would actually like to see this group, this working group, absorb the East Village Task Force as well. The issues are the same. They are no different. And you just got one side of the canal and the other side of the canal. There's still the southern end of the city, but the issues are all the same. And most of the players are the same. So it would just make more sense rather than two groups doing the same work. Just make it one group.
Are you suggesting that there be one representative from the East Side group,
Well,
or
I
the
think
entire East Side group?
I would think that, you know, just the ward council could do that. I don't really think you would need any more than that. The two public members that are on this group make more sense to just leave it go that way.
Mr. Louis?
Sure, through your worship, to Councillor Demery, I think that that's a good idea. I think that both working groups would exist for the same reasons, and I think there's an opportunity. You will see from my memo that one of the Ward 1 councillors couldn't attend and asked Councillor Demery to attend in his place. There could be an opportunity to have Councillor Demery continue to sit from her ward and have the other Ward 1 councillor come from the newly elected council. And consider calling this a community wellness group, and because the East Village Task Force, in fact, did much more than addressing crime and vandalism. It was a wellness group for the entire part of the ward, and we worked on things like recycling and garbage and community services. And I think that as much as we talk about a safety issue and a vandalism issue in Port Colborne, I can't state enough how safe Port Colborne is. I mean, we are aware of issues that I've listed earlier, including some vandalism, some use of addictive drugs and alcohol and things like that. But this is a problem that confronts many, many municipalities. We're not unique. It's not unsafe. It's a very safe place to come and visit and to come and to the stores. And I don't want Port Colborne to be tarnished by the name of this group or the work that this group is trying to do. So to call it the CAO's, working group on community wellness and include the East Village Task Force into its mandate, I think would be a big step forward.
My own concern is that how many members do you have on the East Side Task Force?
At this time, Mr. Mayor, there are no more public members on it. So it is the right time to do this. Yeah, they've moved and there is, we're calling for members rather than do that. This is the right time to absorb it. Like I said, the same players, same issues, it just makes more sense.
Sure. Through your worship, I can follow up on those comments by saying we haven't had East Village Task Force meeting probably in excess of 12 months because of quorum issues and members who either did resign or never formally resigned, but in fact gave up their duties. And the staff who were attending would be the same staff that were attending these meetings, bylaw, police, and so on. And to have them sort of, there would be a sense of redundancy, and it would frankly be a bit of a drag on their time to have them attend both meetings. It would help with productivity to have them at one meeting only.
So can we have a recommendation to amend the membership to include the East Side Task Force?
I can do that.
One of the ward councillors?
Yeah, I could move a recommendation that we dissolve the East Village Task Force and blend it.
Let's not perhaps dissolve anything. Let's just deal with the motion at hand.
Okay, sorry. We're talking about this motion. We're not talking about asking the East Village Task Force to come under it?
I think I'm asking you to move an amendment to
okay, I'm moving an amendment to this motion that that this community wellness, is that what we'll call this, the CAO's community wellness group, would absorb the East Village Task Force. Do the same work. Absorb makes the most sense. We just bring it on board.
Yeah. Or blend.
To blend. All right, we blend it. Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have any speakers to that motion? It's moved and seconded. Larry, nobody wants to speak on it, then fine. Call for the vote. All those in favor of the recommendation, amendment to the recommendation? It's unanimously moved and seconded and voted upon? Yes. Okay, now are we ready to move on the motion as amended, the recommendation as amended? All those in favor of the recommendation as amended? That's carried unanimously. That concludes the items for consideration. Unless there's any comment from someone? There being none, call for any notices of motion. There are none. Motion to adjourn. Mr. Frank Dance, Mr. Yvonne Doucette. Moved and carried. This meeting is adjourned. At this time, I'd like to move on to call an order the regular meeting of council of 27-18 held today, Tuesday, November 13th at City Hall. Are there any addendum items, Madam Clerk?
There are no addendum items, Mr. Mayor.
I call for motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Butters, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest, Madam Clerk? Are there any disclosures of interest? None being indicated. Let's call for the adoption of minutes of the regular meeting of Council 25-18 held on October 9th, 2018. Moved by Mr. Bodner, seconded by Mr. Danch. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. There being none indicated. And I call for motion to approve those items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Danch, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Are there any proclamations, Madam Clerk?
There are no proclamations this evening, Mr. Mayor.
I call for a motion to approve minutes, boards, of commissions, and committees. And Madam Clerk, could you read those out for me?
Minutes of the Port Colborne Transit Advisory Committee meeting of May 23rd, 2018 and September 26th, 2018. Minutes of the Port Colborne Public Library Board meeting of September 11th, 2018. Minutes of the Canal Days Advisory Committee meeting of July 18, 2018 and September 19th, 2018, and minutes of the Port Colborne Active Transportation Committee meeting of September 17th, 2018.
Could we have mover and a seconder of those minutes as listed? Moved by Councillor Doucette, seconded by Councillor Main.
Yeah, sounds good.
All in favor? Opposed? Those are carried. Consideration of bylaws. Madam Clerk, do we have a list of bylaws?
I have a list of bylaws, Mr. Mayor. The bylaw to adopt an interim control bylaw for all lands within the city of Port Colborne will be added to the next agenda as the recommendation was amended during the committee of the whole meeting. We have bylaw number 66227718 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a franchise agreement between the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne and Enbridge Gas Distribution Incorporated. Bylaw number 66237818 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a transit agreement renewal with the Corporation of the City of Welland Transit Division for the local community bus and the link to Welland. Bylaw number 66247918 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with V. Gibbons Contracting regarding tender number 2018-03 water meter and meter chamber installations. Bylaw number 66258018 being a bylaw to temporarily close sections of various streets to vehicular traffic for the purpose of the annual Lighted Santa Claus Parade. Bylaw number 66268118 being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 43104602, being a bylaw prescribing on and off street parking for persons with disabilities within the city of Port Colborne. Bylaw number 66278218, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 65753018, respecting lands legally described as Part Lot 10, Concession 2, municipally known as 1937 Brookfield Road, and bylaw number 66288318, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its regular meeting of November 13th, 2018.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll deal with these bylaws in bulk. Are there any questions before we ask for a motion to accept those bylaws? Moved by Councillor. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Demray. All those in favor? Can I see those hands again, please? Those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Call for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Frank Dench, seconded by Barb Butters. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you for almost the last meeting of the session.